Inside King's College Chapel in Cambridge, the choir is rehearsing for a service that for many signals the start of Christmas. Broadcast on radio live to millions across the globe, the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols is approaching its centenary. Our cameras have been given privileged access to the choir and a front row seat for the highlights of this anniversary year. Meet the choristers and choral scholars. Discover why King's College Choir has become such a national treasure. And just what makes it one of the best in the world.
I felt the bottom of 74, he saw a star, was a little bit on the loud side. You got the
December the 23rd, 2017, and preparations are in full swing for the annual service, the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols.
Well, we'll give you another go at it and work even harder at the text.
Broadcast on BBC Radio to an audience of around 75 million, for the 16 choristers and 16 choral scholars, it's the high point of the year.
Semitones, and tell me what sort of sky it was. What sort of sky was it?
This will be the 4th time chorister Jack Bowley has sung in the festival service.
I really like the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols. It's a really exhilarating day when we go in and you know that lots of people are listening to you all around the world, and it's a great feeling.
Charlie Bajent is one of the choral scholars.
I think the 9 Lessons and Carols Festival is probably the most special moment of the year for us in the choir. It's the moment when we realise that actually this is what the choir has its world-famous image for, and we're so lucky to be a part of that.
As the choir rehearses, the technicians from the radio outside broadcast unit make their final adjustments. Installing the microphones is no easy task.
It's one of the more stressful activities that I get involved in an average year. We have quite a big choice of microphones, very high up, where we can actually capture the sound of the building. The idea is that if you know how this building sounds, you will be able to tell, just by listening to a little bit of the audio, that you were definitely in King's Chapel, live on Christmas Eve. So Illuminari, yep. Simon, yeah.
Page 28.
The BBC radio team works closely with the director of music, Stephen Cleabury, to ensure the sound is perfect.
Those second bass Gs are there, but they could be...
They are there.
Just a
Could
little
be
more.
a bit more, yeah. Yeah. There seem to me to be no systemic problems are recurrent.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Good, well, thank you very much. Glad you go smoothly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Bye-bye.
Outside, people have already begun arriving for the service. Some of those waiting are regulars.
It's funny, it's just like a little group of people from all over the world, and we only ever see each other at this time of year.
I think Hong Kong, quite a few from America, and various other places as Australia. People have travelled specifically to come for the service.
All over the world.
To be here at King's College, it's a once-in-a-lifetime, unforgettable experience, and I cannot wait. To me, it's the best worship service on the planet.
Ladies and gents, I'm sorry to disappoint, but you are now definitely beyond the point that we've got tickets available and guaranteed. What we are going to do is operate a standby system. Again, I'm sorry to disappoint, but it's ever thus with carols at Christmas Eve, I'm afraid. Thank you.
It's Christmas Eve and just 5 hours to go until the live broadcast.
Very sad.
Very sad. We should have just got up half an hour earlier and perhaps we'd have got in. We got here at 7:05.
We come from near Liverpool, so we've always wanted to do this, but there'll be another year.
We're very disappointed. We left at about between 2 and 3 o'clock this morning. We've come from Cardiff and haven't been to bed yet, so we're quite disappointed to get so close. And
she's been up for 24 hours straight.
For those lucky enough to have tickets, the wait is nearly over. They, together with listeners around the world, will soon hear the sound of a lone chorister sing the first verse of the opening carol, Once in Royal David's City.
This is BBC Radio 4. And now we go live to the chapel of King's College, Cambridge, for a festival of 9 lessons and carols.
And for the first time, our cameras have been allowed in to capture the moment that chorister steps forward. But only one man knows who that will be.
What lies behind it is the idea that if you nominate a chorister a week or 2 weeks beforehand, he's got quite a lot of time to get wound up about it, which we don't want to happen. And moreover, even if you do that, that particular one might wake up on Christmas Eve with a sore throat. And it's really down to who's in the best voice on Christmas Eve. I make the selection in my mind as a result of that, and then that's communicated to the chosen one just as we go on air.
There's this moment of complete silence in the chapel where Mr. Clibberry's listening with his headphones to the presenters and you can hear your own heartbeat. That's the point where you get most nervous.
Say when. Go.
When Mr. Clibberry pointed at me to do the solo, it all kind of emotions came at one point and it was just all kind of unreal. Once you're pointed at, it's very, very quick, and once you realise you're doing it, it's done. But I was very conscious of the fact that loads and loads of people were listening to me doing it, and that was quite scary.
So begins a service that 100 years on has hardly changed. And what started as an act of worship for the people of Cambridge is now a global phenomenon. But its roots lie in the ashes of the First World War and its impact on a young army chaplain, Eric Milner White. In 1914, at the outbreak of the war, Milner White volunteered for service. Nothing could have prepared him for the Western Front.
Battle is indescribable, unimaginable. The fresh night air was itself a rushing road like a waterfall, as 1,000 shells tore through it. But most awesome was the noise. We felt so powerless against those splitting cracks and roars, and dreamt of the metal tearing its way into the bodies of poor men.
Milner White felt the church was failing the troops. The usual practice was to hold its customary services out on the battlefield. In contrast, Milner White simply said prayers for the dead, which was preferred by the soldiers.
He didn't doubt, I don't think, the love of God or the presence of God. What he wanted to know was how to communicate it to people who had been brutalized and traumatized by this kind of experience.
In May 1918, Milner White was appointed Dean of King's College Chapel. He determined the chapel should set an example and reach out to people in a way that acknowledged their suffering.
This is why he wanted to simplify services. And it's that same insight, that same passion for people that drove his desire to have a different kind of service on Christmas Eve in 1918. A service that would have a little bit more drama, a little bit more colour, would be accessible and meaningful, and would be an appropriate occasion for hospitality.
Milner White introduced a service that would acknowledge the war dead, but, in his own words, would provide warmth and delight. And for the choir of King's College, Cambridge, that service, the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols, has brought fame and prestige. With that has come more work and more pressure. Once the holidays are over, another hectic year will begin. It's early morning, and at King's College School, while most pupils are attending assembly, the choristers are gathered for their daily rehearsal. Jack is in Year 7. He's been following Stephen Cleabury's directions since he joined the choir, aged 9.
Good. You've had that tight quaver knocked off? Yeah? Good. That was lovely. When you joined the arpeggio, that was really good. Here's the top.
Yeah, he's an interesting man. He's been teaching for a long time. He has quite a different style as all the teachers at school because he's quite old-fashioned in his teachings. Well, he makes us sit up and he gets quite annoyed at us if we don't sit up.
Rehearsal over, it's then a normal school day.
Le croque-monsieur, you might know this one because it's quite famous.
There are 400 pupils at the school, aged between 4 and 13.
Madame, très bien.
Unlike most of the pupils, the choristers are all boarders.
Barbie dure. Barbie dure, Jacques.
Sports.
Sport.
Celui qui aime le sport.
Très bien. Barbotine.
Boarding allows an independence which very much fuels the independence that you are expecting of the musician. A child needs to still be a child, but to balance it with that sense of sort of responsibility and commitment and rigour, internal rigour. And I think boarding plays a part in developing that.
Yvette Day is the first female head at the school. She also holds the ancient title Master over the Choristers, responsible for the boys' education and health.
We do teach them to look after their voices. It is part of having a very good diet. It is part of having sufficient sleep, as it would be for any athlete. A singer is an athlete. It's an athlete of the vocal cords.
Boarding can prove a challenge for parents.
It can be difficult as a family because he's away all the time. He lives on this oil rig. You know, it's a full-on job. But we've got great faith in the school. And I think that's essential for any parent to hand over their child. So we've been delighted with the care that he's had here. I'm very, very happy that he's gone through this experience.
The choristers walk to chapel wearing their traditional uniform, or Eton.
They're very hot because most of it's black. It's been a tradition in the choir since the beginning of the whole thing, so it's a big privilege to be able to wear those clothes and walk down to chapel.
5 days each week, the choir sings evensong.
Phones off, please, and no photography inside at all. Thank you.
Daily worship, as long as we are in residence as a college, has been one that the college has taken very seriously down the centuries and continues to this day.
Today is a special service for the choristers as their parents and siblings are in the congregation.
The parents always queue in a different line to the public, so they get in first and there's reserved seats for them where you can see the whole choir, so you can see your son singing. So when my parents come, which isn't often because they live so far away, it's a really good feeling because I know they're really proud of me. Singing in chapel is quite an amazing experience. We're learning music every rehearsal. We always rehearse the mag, the canticles, the anthem, the introit and the psalm.
The choral scholars are all undergraduates at Cambridge. Joe Zubair is in his first year at King's, reading music.
The workload, the academic workload is the same. It's just that there's less time in which to do the work. But I actually think that being in the choir doesn't have a negative impact on the ability to do work. I think that having the extra commitment of being in the choir focuses you more because you've got less time in which to do it, so you have to be more organised about it.
Not all choral scholars study music.
I chose to study philosophy because whilst I've always been very interested in the performance side of music, I didn't really think academic music at university was the subject for me. Also, it might have been a bit of a musical overload if I was studying it and singing in the choir every day.
The music and choir of King's College, Cambridge represent the best of the English choral tradition. As far back as the turn of the last century, the choir was considered one of the greatest in the land. But it was the start of broadcasting church services on BBC Radio that changed the choir's fortune.
These early recordings from cathedrals, very indistinct, poor quality. Nobody was quite sure what was going on. The engineers didn't want to do them. The religious broadcasting staff didn't want to do them. But Reith, Lord Reith, Mr. BBC, he thought they were very important as a kind of bringing the nation together, a national symbol.
The first radio broadcast of the Festival of Nine Lessons and Carols was in 1928. David Briggs, now 101, was both a King's chorister and later choral scholar. He took part in that first radio transmission. The significance of the occasion seemed of only minor interest to the boys, as he told his daughter, Anne Atkins.
All I remember is this Mr. Anderson. He used to come year after year, but he just brought a sort of suitcase full of bits and pieces and put it in the corner of the vestry and fiddled around with them.
Yeah.
And then off we went, you see.
And he was the only technician?
Yes, he was the only one.
I know that whenever you're talking about this, other choristers will say to you, did you sing the solo, the once and roll solo? Because you were head chorister, weren't you, in 92?
I was second, actually.
Oh, second.
Yes.
And they can't believe when you say you can't remember.
I really don't know. I don't remember at all.
Because it wasn't significant at all.
No, nothing special, no.
No, right.
Despite the poor technical quality of the radio broadcast, the festival was a welcome addition to the BBC's Christmas schedule.
In the early 30s, I'm not sure. I think it was something like around 2.5 million licenses, probably, something like that. But if it was, then it's been estimated probably 10 million people were listening.
Eric Milner-White remained as Dean of the College Chapel, and his relationship with the BBC was harmonious. Except when, in 1939, the BBC proposed broadcasting just the second half of the service, claiming that as Christmas Eve was a Sunday, listeners might tire of too much religion.
Here was the BBC wanting half of it, and Milner-White was saying you can't do the first half and suddenly fade, and you can't do the second half because most of it is just congregational hymns. So don't do it. Everybody wants it. And in the end, they faded. They took just half of it. And people complained. The college was absolutely right. There was no question after that of them ever doing it again. The irony was that the red lights kept on because Italy and France had asked for the whole service, and they got it.
The format may not have changed, but a more recent tradition has been established by Stephen Cleobury, Director of Music, since the early 80s.
Each year since 1983, I have introduced a newly commissioned carol into the Christmas Eve service. What was behind that was a feeling that this is a great tradition, but that great traditions mustn't become fossilized, and so we needed new blood.
One of the first people he commissioned was composer Judith Weir. Her piece, Illuminare Jerusalem, has become a staple of the choir's Christmas music.
My family lived up in Scotland, and I seem to remember I was up there in the summer with my parents, and I think went into a bookshop where I bought a book of medieval Scottish poetry. I had some kind of fascination with this poem. Music-wise, I think it just really is always a question of finding melodies and harmony that are appropriate to the words, and that's what I did.
Judith was back in Scotland for Christmas when she first heard Illuminare Jerusalem on the radio.
I was very proud to have a carol in this famous event. In fact, in a way, it was all the better to hear it in its absolute true setting, which is on the radio, perhaps in the kitchen with my mum, finishing off the mince pies or something.
It's a long, hot summer. And back at school, Jack is in his element.
Well, cricket is just a brilliant sport. I could play it all day. I'd happily play 5 days test match. And rugby, I don't know why I like rugby. I just really enjoy it.
In addition to the full-time choristers, the boarding house is also home to a small number of probationers. These younger singers replace the boys who will leave the choir each year.
It's very much a gradual process. It's a probationary period. They do board during the week, so it's effectively weeknight boarding. They do the morning rehearsals. They sometimes work in the afternoons. The children are not going to be asked to be singing in main services. They're not going to be exposed in that way.
The boys come from a variety of backgrounds. Meet Vladimir, who arrived at the school in autumn 2017.
I was just scared when I came to this school because I didn't know anything much. When I came in the winter term, it was just everything just was like a jigsaw puzzle and just fitted in.
Vladimir was born in Romania, but his family then moved to England in search of a better life. The turning point for Vladimir came when his mum took him to a concert at King's College Chapel.
She brought me to St. Matthew's Passion in 2017 at Easter in King's, and it took about 3 hours. At the end of it, I was like, Mama, can you bring me to this audition? Because I want to be in this choir.
I just wanted to see if this is just the magic of the magic of the concert, or something that he really wants to do, because, you know, it would have been a big change for us.
But for Vladimir, this was no passing whim.
I just wrote an email to the choir. The choir replied within the next 2 hours. They said, come for the informal meeting with Mr. Cleobury.
So I went to Mr. Cleobury's office, and he asked me, how loud can you sing, how quiet can you sing, how high can you sing, how low can you sing? And when that was done, my mum came into the room. Mr. Cleobury said to her, this is the right place, you have brought your child to the right choir.
Vladimir then auditioned, and just 2 months after he'd first heard the choir sing in the chapel, he was accepted as a probationer.
We miss him terribly, but it is a great opportunity for him, and we appreciate this. And it was his desire to be here.
If you use the paddle, you will just go crazy. Since you went away, the days grow hard.
For the choral scholars, it's time to swap the sacred for the secular. Under the name The King's Men, the scholars perform on punts each June. The men rehearse in the afternoon.
It would be really useful if we have just a couple of minutes without singing.
Well, this is the same programme that the King's Men sings throughout the whole year, and it's chosen at the beginning of the year, and then we practice it and rehearse it throughout the year, and at Easter we had our King's Men tours around the UK. And so it kind of all builds up to this concert at the end of the year. So this is kind of our biggest audience and one of our most special concerts. Or are we... No. Yeah, no.
We're that way around, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And let's go. Let's go. This should be great.
Are you going to
Joe's mother, Claire, has travelled over from Belfast for the performance.
He always sang from he was a tiny, tiny tot. He was able to sing when he was about 18 months old. He developed such a love and such a passion for singing that he did want to go to choir school and wanted to be able to sing a lot more. And I think he saw his future in England, at least, possibly further afield. So he looked into going to a sixth form school in England, and he ended up in Winchester.
What the song is about. Two women gossiping to each other about how good their husbands are, saying things like...
His accent is very different when he's over here. When he gets home, it changes very quickly because we pretend we don't understand his English accent.
Singing in a smaller group provides a chance for the men to show off their individual talents.
In choir, there are loads of great solos that come up, but also in King's Men, we often have the opportunity to sing big solos or in sort of small quartets and things like that, which gives you maybe the opportunity to show your personality a bit more because you're not trying to blend with everyone else, and you can, sing a bit more soloistically.
James's parents, Judith and John, are in the audience.
Yes, we feel proud of him, but I suppose over the years we've got used to him doing so much singing that it's become a way of life in some ways.
Yeah.
But of course, you're always proud when it goes well.
Yeah.
And I was always very nervous at singing competitions, music festivals, that sort of thing.
Well, he always seemed to enjoy doing it. That was the main thing. We weren't pushing him, just facilitating, the realisation of his talent and ambition.
The concert and the evening go without a hitch. Almost.
The most difficult moment of the whole evening was first stepping onto the punt to discover that they weren't properly fastened together. One of the guys said, "Oh, it's okay, just straddle the two of them, put one leg in one and one leg in the other," and then ended up doing the splits.
Yeah, I noticed that.
That was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
But we got it fixed, so it's fine.
Yeah, and it all went okay in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now isn't she lovely? Isn't she lovely? Isn't she lovely? Without you can see the one that's over you.
Tonight I thought was really fabulous, a really fitting end to a very, very busy first year. And the hundreds of people that were here absolutely loved it. Well, you saw at the end, you got a standing ovation.
Yeah.
It was
Two
pretty
encores.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice feeling.
The school holidays have begun, but for the singers, there's no let-up. It's time for the annual summer tour. In previous years, the choir has toured the United States, Europe and beyond. But this year, it's sticking closer to home, playing dates in England and Ireland, finishing at Ampleforth Abbey in Yorkshire.
Page 34, bottom line.
Apart from rehearsals, the main thing that we do on tour is just sort of conserving vocal energy. So, not very much shouting. No shouting. Just relaxing, maybe a bit of steaming. It was very useful actually when we went to Limerick on this tour, because the hotel to which we went had a steam room, and most of the choral scholars spent most of their free time in that steam room. It's very good for the voice.
In the afternoon, the choir rehearses in the Abbey Church.
It's not a good idea to be learning new repertoire on tour because there are other preoccupations. So it has to be planned carefully. It needs to be music that's well inside the system before we take it on tour.
Nearly 3 hours later, the choristers are ready for a break.
We all like to run around and have lots of fun with each other, and you don't get that much time on tours with rehearsing and stuff like that. So when we get the opportunity, we always take it.
Tonight's performance is part of the annual Ryedale Festival, and it's a full house. In the programme, 2 pieces by King's favourite Judith Weir, including Ascending into Heaven.
I was sitting straight on and the music seemed to be swirling round. There's a kind of 4 ways it could go, so it's a kind of circular wind of music. Whereas in King's, although people might think it's an echoey space, but if you're sitting in the choir part of King's, it's very intimate and very contained. So this was a shock, a kind of good shock tonight of hearing this very, a rushing mighty wind, you could say, of music.
It's the intimate acoustic of King's College Chapel that gives a unique quality to the sound of the choir.
Okay, just need a couple of seconds of silence before we start.
And it's the venue for its latest recording session. First up, Adam's Fall, composed by Richard Elvin Jones and performed by the choir on Christmas Eve in 2017.
Boys, no early S please, 1 second, until the set. Once more.
It's for a special 100th anniversary album featuring music from the archives as well as new recordings.
We're very lucky in that this chapel is our home and it has one of the most amazing acoustics in the world, so there's absolutely no reason why we would leave here to go to a studio. Yes, we have to deal with a bit of traffic noise outside, the bells that chime every hour, but it is the best place to record for this choir, and it's what the choir is known for.
Yes, what I was going to suggest, I just wonder whether the boys are sitting slightly at 4-4.
Yeah.
Might just be worth.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, just that. We just had a noise. We had a little bang underneath it. Just
Each piece is broken down into sections and may be reworked.
We can do what we call patch a little moment. Perhaps it's a really difficult bit that it would just be nice to get a really short run into. So during the session this afternoon, there was one bar that Stephen and I just wanted to do in isolation, and then we can slot that in a bit later.
Yep, that was the one, thank you.
It's probationer Vladimir's first recording session with the choir.
It's sometimes quite hard when you have to stand up for 1 hour and then have a sit down for 1 minute and then go back up for another hour and then have a tiny break and then come back.
These recording sessions are the hardest the choir works, I think, because they are aiming for 100%. It's a 3-hour session, they get a 15-minute break. They love doing it because at the end of it, they come away with a brilliant memento. It's something they can keep for the rest of their lives, and it's the way that millions of people around the world can listen to them on these things. So that's my telephone, 1 second. Hello, Stephen. Yes, I'll be with you in 20 seconds. All right, thanks. Sorry, I'm afraid I'm being called away.
Was that Steve?
It was, yeah. Yeah.
The choir has been making recordings since the 1920s, but it wasn't until the 1960s that it began to release a steady stream of long-playing records, or LPs, under its director of music, David Wilcox.
When I came to King's, which was in 1964, when I arrived there, I think he was really getting into his stride as the director of music of King's, and he'd established this sound. He focused very much on vowels. We sang with very bright vowels, and also he was very, very particular about consonants and where the endings of notes came.
David Wilcox also transformed the Christmas carol, adding harmonies and descants, new melodies that would blend with the main tune. They're now used across the world, and there's no more famous example than the Wilcox arrangement of "O Come All Ye Faithful."
I don't think there's anyone in choral music that doesn't love that moment, that you wait for that moment all the time, this reharmonisation, the last verse of "O Come All Ye Faithful," that Wilcox did. In terms of the descants, I think Wilcox really redefined what a descant was. For boys, with a loud organ playing, to sing high and to sing loud is just the best thing in the world. And we loved it. And Wilcox knew exactly how to write those descants. The one for "O Come All Ye Faithful," absolutely brilliant. And it goes, which of course he nicked out of "Ding Dong Merry Lou on High." So very clever, he incorporated that into that descant. Brilliant.
A new school and university year has started.
It is always nice to have a break in August, really. I find that I do miss choir actually very quickly. So I have a few days where I'm absolutely relieved not to have the daily evensongs and all the services. But then I start to miss people very quickly and miss the routine that we have here in King's.
So it's multi-dimensional. We're looking for the sliding, gliding, easy movement of the head on top of the spine.
In a chapel vestry, Charlie, Joe and James are brushing up on their Alexander technique, rusty after the summer break.
Come and have a lie down.
The technique teaches people how to move comfortably and improve posture. It's used by singers to maintain their stamina and vocal strength, and even helps with performance nerves.
I think that the Alexander technique lessons are really useful. I'm really glad that the choir offers it, particularly for choral singers who are very much standing in a fixed position. It's quite easy to become quite rigid and stiff in the way you go about your singing, particularly if you're doing it for an extended period of time every day. So it's really useful to learn to be sort of supple and just to be aware of what you're doing.
So easy to get into bossing ourselves around, and it's just finding that doorway into being easier with yourself.
You do notice that when you're stressed and you start to stand in quite a tense way during a recording session or whatever, your voice gets tired much more quickly than it does if you've just come back after a holiday or whatever and you're more relaxed in yourself.
And allowing that easy balance there.
At King's College School, there's a space where choristers can relax.
Okay, so I'm in Year 8 now, so this is my last year in the choir, and this is the senior common room. We've put some pictures on the walls just to brighten the place up a bit. So there's the middle one, that's after the chorister football match, which is a match against St John's, which is one of the biggest matches of the year. So to the right of that, we've got Noggin, the boarding house dog. He's the housemaster's dog. He's a really big dog. He's very silly and he'll do anything for a sausage. And then above that, up at the top, we've got some of me and my friends who are with the current senior organ scholar. And we, before the service and after the service, played some organ pieces, and that on the big King's organ, which was really fun and enjoyable.
The choir has welcomed some new faces. Vladimir, together with his fellow probationers, was inducted into the choir in a special service in September.
We sing the anthem, which on the day was Balfour Gardiner, which was a really good piece. And I was really happy, so I cried of joy.
Afterwards, they received their top hat.
We got the top hat in the vestry, and it was in a bag, and when we saw the bag, we were really excited. We were like, oh, yes! We're getting our top hats.
New faces mean new voices.
Good. We've got the idea of these dynamics very well. Just do the first At this early stage in the year, I'm actually pleased with the sound the boys are making. It's a good, strong sound. Of course, always at the beginning of the year, there's a question of rebuilding a degree of confidence and sure-footedness, but I think that's going well too. So I'm feeling we're in a good place.
It's really fun in the choir stalls, because when you're a full chorister, you really feel part of it. We always look at the conductor, especially when there's a new passage, because we don't want to come in late.
You're a little bit late, so it's in a minute.
Rehearsals have begun for the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols.
And one.
This year will be Stephen Cleabury's last as Director of Music. He's retiring in the summer of 2019 after 37 years.
Go on to page 4.
In keeping with his own tradition of commissioning new work, he's asked Judith Weir to once again compose a carol for the festival. Today, the choristers are rehearsing it for the first time.
Good, that's well read, the first 2 phrases. Well, I think Judith's carol this time is perfectly judged for the choir and the chapel. We have the new element of the solo cello, which will be an interesting colour to introduce into the sound. And it's very singable. Crescendo.
Judith has chosen a poem by the 18th century Methodist preacher Charles Wesley, O Mercy Divine.
It is a poem about the Christmas story with Mary, her delight at the child, and then the shepherds, the wise men. In a way, it's a very simple rhythm, but it's quite clever in the way that the lines elide. So, for instance, verse 1, O mercy divine, how couldst thou incline my God to become such an infant as mine? The music's almost coming out of there already. It's a very, very simple, almost like a folk song. I started to think a bit about, actually, what will the music be like, and could I write any of it down? What the choir would sing, just something very rough about the chords that they might use. But already we know that it's going to have this da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-dum. There'll be quite a lot of that kind of rhythm in there. The important thing, I think, now is not to be too predictable about the rhythm. You've got to put a spanner in the works sometimes. The happy day came, I think, when I could start putting the words to these chords, and I've got my characteristic thing, which is that the upper voices are kind of answering the lower voices. Eventually I get to the point where I can combine what the choir are doing with some cello music. So that's starting to look a bit like the actual composition itself.
The autumn term is always the busiest for the choir. In addition to its daily duties and preparation for Christmas, this year the choir has been invited to take part in the town's Remembrance Sunday service to mark 100 years since the end of the First World War.
On Christmas Eve, we go out of our way to invite people to join us. But especially bearing in mind the origins of the service, it seemed quite right that we should, on this occasion, go out beyond the walls of the chapel and join with the people of the town to remember with respect and dedication the sacrifice that was made and to be in solidarity with all people from all walks of life who have some kind of memory and relationship with the Great War, as it was called.
211 King's men died in World War I. It was the loss to the college, together with the loss experienced by the people of the town, that led the Dean of King's College Chapel, Eric Milner-White, to include a prayer for the fallen in the first Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols. 100 years on, and it is still read at the start of the service on Christmas Eve.
Lastly, let us remember before him them who rejoice with us, but upon another shore and in a greater light, that multitude which no man can number, whose hope was in the Word made flesh, and with whom in this Lord Jesus we forevermore are one.
My feeling is very strongly that when he wrote those words and when he read them at the first service, what was on his mind were the many members of this college, the many young men he met in France and Belgium who had died in battle. That's the other shore. The greater light is obviously the kingdom of heaven.
The choir is getting ready for the TV recording of the festival service. Such was the popularity of the radio broadcast, a televised version was introduced by the BBC in 1964. Called Carols from Kings, it's been broadcast annually ever since.
I can remember recording sessions with the television with, of course, a load of boys being fascinated by these huge cameras. And I think the cameramen had quite a lot of fun because, of course, we gave them such a hard time, always wanting to know how these things worked. And it was a fantastic time.
The television and radio services are not completely the same.
The opportunity has been taken to introduce non-scriptural readings, so there might be a piece of literature or more often a poem, and that's given us a little bit more scope to vary what we do. But they are two distinct programmes. Radio is live on Christmas Eve, television is pre-recorded in mid-December.
And so, once again this Christmas Eve, a global congregation will tune in for the Festival of 9 Lessons and Carols on the radio and watch Carols from Kings on television. All to enjoy a festive offering of colour, warmth and delight as started in 1918 by the Dean, Eric Milner White.
He couldn't have imagined the way in which it would develop through broadcasting, and I don't believe that he would have thought we would still be doing it 100 years and more later. And the question it leaves us with is, what should we be doing now? One of the answers to that is to keep doing what we do well. The other answers, well, that remains to be seen as time goes by.
I think we always want to do the best possible job we can for our own sakes, but also because we know so many people are listening. But this year there's an added pressure in a way because we want to do the best possible job we can for Stephen, because obviously he's been doing it so long, and we want to make his final 9 Lessons and Carols as special as possible.
This is my last festival of 9 Lessons and Carols, and it's going to be a memory that I never forget, and I can't wait to make this one. And it's also Mr. Clearby's last service, and it will be a bit emotional.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be singing with my friends on Christmas Eve in one of the nicest chapel in the world. I'm also happy for new beginnings on the next term.
What an extraordinary experience it is. You are a child who is living a sound that lifts the spirits of the world who listens. There is no stronger power in a child's voice than the power to change the way people think. That's being a chorister.